Yesterday afternoon, Stephanie White, head coach of the Indiana Felines, she provided the media with an update on Caitlin Clark. Now, if you read between the lines, it's easy to see that Caitlin Clark is nowhere near close to returning. Watch it for yourself.
No return to practice. She's been able to get a little bit more in her full court running, with her all her body weight. It's really building up from doing minimal to then building some endurance to do longer periods of time. She's been able to do a little bit more on the court in terms of how she moves, but not into practice yet.
The WNBA is facing its worst nightmare. The league's biggest star, the player who single-handedly transformed women's basketball from a niche sport into appointment television, is essentially done for the season, and the numbers don't lie about what happens when Caitlin Clark isn't on the court.
It sounds to me like Caitlin Clark is still in the process of rehab. I have followed the rehab process of Zion Williamson many times over the years. He will start going through drills, then he will start practicing one-on-one. He'll progress to 3-on-3 until he eventually gets to full practice 5-on-5. Caitlin Clark, it sounds like, hasn't even started the process. Sounds like she is still going through drills. She's still trying to ramp up just to get to practice. I don't know if you've looked at the calendar recently. We're in the middle of August. The WNBA regular season ends in 4 weeks. I don't think Caitlin Clark is coming back this season.
We're talking about a player who has been limited to just 13 games this season. 13 games out of what should have been a full campaign. 3 separate soft tissue injuries have kept the Indiana Fever's superstar sidelined, and each absence has sent shockwaves through the entire league. This isn't just about one team missing their best player anymore. This is about an entire league losing its lifeline. The financial impact has been nothing short of devastating. When Clark went down with her latest injury, ticket prices for games plummeted by a staggering 7. Think about that for a moment. A single player's absence caused ticket values to crater by nearly 3/4, but the real panic started when the television ratings came in. National viewership dropped by 55% during Clark's absence. Games featuring the Fever saw their ratings tank by 53% when she couldn't play.
Last year, WNBA players were doing everything in their power to get rid of Caitlin Clark. These minimum wage earners, they did not want to be rescued by the Great White Hope. This year, WNBA players have gotten exactly what they wanted.
These numbers reveal a terrifying reality for the WNBA. The league has become dangerously dependent on one player. Without Clark, casual fans simply aren't tuning in. The excitement disappears, the storylines vanish, and most importantly for the league's bottom line, the money stops flowing. But let's dive deeper into what these numbers actually mean for the economics of women's basketball. Before Clark's arrival, WNBA games were averaging around 400,000 viewers on a good night. When she stepped onto the court, those numbers shot up to over 2 million for marquee matchups. That's not just growth, that's a complete transformation of the viewing landscape. Television executives were scrambling to secure more WNBA broadcast rights, something that would have been unthinkable just 2 years ago. The merchandise sales tell an even more dramatic story. Clark's jersey sales weren't just leading the WNBA, they were outselling many NBA superstars. Retail partners were struggling to keep her gear in stock, and the secondary market was pricing her rookie cards at unprecedented levels for women's basketball collectibles. All of that momentum has ground to a halt with her extended absence.
Over the last couple of weeks, the biggest story in this dump of a league has been generous fans donating dildos to unappreciative players. Instead of appreciating these valuable gifts, WNBA players, they took it as another opportunity to lecture their fan base. These tools are too small. We're not cheerleaders, we're pretend basketball players.
The injury timeline has become increasingly concerning for anyone hoping to see Clark return this season. After her most recent groin injury in mid-July, the Indiana Fever announced there's no timetable for her return. The team underwent further medical evaluations, and while no additional damage was discovered, they're prioritizing her long-term health over any short-term comeback. That's corporate speak for don't expect her back anytime soon. What makes this situation even more devastating is the timing. Clark was forced to withdraw from the WNBA WNBA All-Star Game, despite being selected as a starter. The All-Star Game, which had reached viewership of 3.4 million viewers the previous year, largely due to Clark's participation, suddenly faced the prospect of proceeding without its biggest draw. The event that was supposed to showcase the league's brightest talents became a reminder of just how much the WNBA relies on Clark's star power. The All-Star Weekend itself became a case study in the Clark effect. Without her presence, social media engagement dropped by nearly 60% compared to the previous year. The celebrity attendance that had become a hallmark of recent WNBA events was noticeably reduced. Even the fashion and lifestyle coverage that had started following women's basketball disappeared almost overnight.
Because this season has proved, without doubt, this league is about one player. Enough of this shit where WNBA players are claiming the league is about more than one player. We're a collective. Everyone loves us. Our league is filled with huge stars. No, your league is filled with extras, one or two supporting cast members, and a superstar.
Before this season, Clark had never missed a game in her college or professional career. She was the definition of reliable the player fans could count on seeing every time they bought a ticket or turned on their television. Her college career at Iowa was built on consistency and durability, playing through minor injuries and always showing up when it mattered most. Now she's sat out more games than she's played, and each absence reinforces how fragile the WNBA's newfound popularity really is. The medical details surrounding her injuries paint a concerning picture. Soft tissue injuries, particularly groin and hamstring problems, have a notorious tendency to recur if not properly managed. The fact that Clark has suffered 3 separate injuries in such a short time frame suggests either an underlying conditioning issue or the accumulated wear and tear of carrying an entire league's expectations on her shoulders. Sports medicine experts point to the unique pressures Clark faces compared to other WNBA players. She's not just dealing with the physical demands of professional basketball, she's managing constant defensive attention from opposing teams who game plan specifically around stopping her. Every possession brings double teams, physical play, and the kind of intense focus typically reserved for the biggest stars in any sport. The psychological toll of her absence extends beyond just Clark herself. Her teammates have struggled to maintain their competitive edge without their leader on the court. The Indiana Fever went from being must-see television to an afterthought in the standing. Role players who had thrived in Clark's system found themselves thrust into spotlight roles they weren't prepared for. The league finds itself in an impossible position. Push Clark to return too early and risk a more serious injury that could sideline her for even longer, but allow her to sit out the remainder of the season and watch as interest continues to plummet. Other players have tried to fill the void, but the reality is harsh. The WNBA doesn't have another player who can generate the same level of excitement, the same television ratings, or the same ticket sale. This dependency exposes a fundamental weakness in how the league has been marketed and promoted. Instead of building multiple stars and storylines, the WNBA allowed itself to become the Caitlin Clark Show. When she's healthy and playing, everything is fantastic. Ratings soar, tickets sell, and mainstream media pays attention. But remove her from the equation, and the entire ecosystem collapses. The contrast with other professional sports leagues is stark. When LeBron James misses games, the NBA doesn't lose half its audience. When Tom Brady retired, the NFL continued to thrive, but the WNBA's over-reliance on Clark has created a vulnerability that's now being brutally exposed. Looking at the broader landscape of women's sports, this situation highlights ongoing challenges with building sustainable popularity. Women's sports have historically struggled with consistency and fan engagement, often experiencing spikes around individual stars or major events before falling back into relative obscurity. The WNBA seemed to have broken through that pattern with Clark, but her absence suggests the breakthrough was more fragile than anyone realized. The coaching staff's recent updates have been telling. When asked about Clark's progress, Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White spoke about gradual improvements in running and movement, but made it clear that a return to practice isn't imminent. Clark is still in the rehabilitation phase, working on building endurance and getting comfortable with full court movement. This isn't a player who's days away from returning. This is someone who's still weeks, possibly months, from being game ready. The rehabilitation process for soft tissue injuries is notoriously unpredictable. Medical professionals emphasize the importance of patience and gradual progression, but the pressure to return a superstar superstar player creates competing interests. The team's medical staff is caught between doing what's best for Clark's long-term health and meeting the expectations of fans, sponsors, and league officials who desperately need her back on the court. Physical therapists who work with professional athletes describe the rehabilitation process as a delicate balance. Push too hard too fast and the injury becomes chronic. Take too conservative an approach and the player loses conditioning and confidence. For someone like Clark, who built her game on explosiveness and quick movements, ensuring complete healing is absolutely critical. With the regular season ending in just a few weeks, the window for Clark's return is rapidly closing. Even if she manages to get healthy in time for the playoffs, she'll be coming back from an extended absence without the rhythm and conditioning that comes from regular game action. The rust factor alone could limit her effectiveness, assuming she even makes it back in time. The playoff implications extend beyond just the Fever's chances. Television networks had been banking on Clark's presence to drive postseason viewership. Playoff games featuring Clark had been projected to potentially break WNBA viewing records, with some estimates suggesting they could reach audiences comparable to major college basketball tournaments. Without her, those projections have been drastically revised downward. The broader implications extend far beyond this season. The WNBA is in the middle of crucial negotiations for a new collective bargaining agreement. Television contracts are up for renewal. The league was positioned to capitalize on Clark's popularity and negotiate from a position of strength. Instead, they're facing questions about their long-term viability without their biggest star. Media rights negotiations have become particularly complicated. Television executives who were prepared to offer significant increases in broadcast fees are now taking a more cautious approach. The Clark factor had been central to many of these discussions, with networks banking on her star power to justify higher rights fees. Her absence has introduced uncertainty into negotiations that were previously trending positive. Streaming platforms that had been aggressively pursuing WNBA content are similarly reassessing their strategies. The league's digital presence had exploded during Clark's rookie season, with highlights featuring her regularly going viral across social media platforms. That organic engagement has virtually disappeared during her absence, raising questions about the sustainability of digital growth. What happens if Clark suffers another injury next season? What if teams figure out how to neutralize her impact? The WNBA has put all its eggs in one basket, and that strategy is proving to be incredibly risky. The league needs to develop contingency plans, build other storylines, and create stars who can carry the load when Clark isn't available. The strategic planning discussions happening in WNBA front offices reveal the depth of this challenge. Marketing executives are scrambling to identify other players who could potentially capture mainstream attention. Social media managers are trying to create compelling content without their biggest draw. Even arena operations teams are adjusting expectations for attendance and concession sales. Player development programs are being reassessed with an eye toward creating more marketable personality. The league is finally recognizing that relying solely on basketball talent isn't enough to build stars in the modern sports entertainment landscape. Players need media training, social media presence, and compelling personal stories that resonate with casual fans. The silence from other WNBA players during this crisis has been deafening. These are the same players who spent last season complaining about the attention Clark received, arguing that the league was about more than one person. Well, now they're getting their wish. Clark is out of the spotlight, and the results speak for themselves. Viewership is down, attendance is down, and media coverage has virtually disappeared. Some players have attempted to step up and fill the leadership void, but none have managed to capture the imagination of casual sports fans the way Clark did. The harsh reality is that star power isn't something that can be manufactured overnight. It requires a unique combination of talent, personality, and timing that very few athletes possess. The social media landscape tells the story most clearly. WNBA-related content had been trending regularly during Clark's active period, with her highlights routinely garnering millions of views. Now, even the league's official accounts struggle to generate significant engagement. The algorithm-driven nature of modern sports media means that without compelling content, visibility disappears rapidly. This situation has also highlighted the physical demands of the WNBA schedule and the unique pressures Clark faces. As the league's marquee attraction, She's not just dealing with the normal wear and tear of professional basketball. She's carrying the weight of an entire league's expectations, playing through constant defensive attention, and managing a spotlight that no other WNBA player has ever experienced. The intensity of defensive schemes designed specifically to stop Clark has been unprecedented in women's basketball. Teams are dedicating entire practice sessions to developing strategies to limit her impact. The physical toll of facing box-and-one defenses, constant double teams, and aggressive hedging on screens accumulates over time, potentially contributing to the injury issues she's now facing. Sports psychologists note the mental fatigue that comes with being the focal point of every opponent's game plan. The pressure to perform at an elite level every night, combined with the knowledge that the entire league's success depends on your presence, creates stress levels that most professional athletes never experience. The medical team's cautious approach makes sense from a long-term perspective, but it's catastrophic for the league's immediate future. Every game Clark misses represents lost revenue, decreased engagement, and missed opportunities to build on the momentum she created. The WNBA had a chance to establish itself as a must-watch product, but injuries have derailed that progress. Financial projections that had been trending upward are now being revised across multiple revenue streams. Ticket sales for the remainder of the season have plateaued, with many games that were previously sold out now showing available seats. Merchandise sales have dropped precipitously, and corporate partnerships are being renegotiated based on reduced exposure expectation. The ripple effects extend to youth participation in basketball as well. Clark had become a role model for young girls across the country, inspiring increased participation in youth basketball programs. Her absence from the national spotlight has coincided with decreased enrollment in some programs, suggesting her influence extended far beyond just professional basketball viewership. Looking ahead, the Indiana Fever and the WNBA face some uncomfortable truth. They need to find ways to maintain interest without their biggest star. They need to develop supporting storylines that can capture casual fans' attention. Most importantly, they need to create a sustainable model that doesn't rely so heavily on one player's health and availability. The coaching staff's reluctance to provide specific timelines speaks volumes about the severity of Clark's situation. When professional sports teams start talking about long-term health and building endurance gradually, that's code for a much longer absence than anyone wants to admit. The fact that she's still working on basic conditioning and hasn't even returned to practice suggests we're looking at a best-case scenario of late-season return, if at all. Industry insiders with knowledge of similar injury situations in professional sports suggest that the timeline being discussed privately is much longer than what's being communicated publicly. The conservative approach being taken indicates that medical professionals are more concerned about the injury than official statements suggest. The ripple effects are being felt across the entire league ecosystem. Sponsors who signed deals expecting Clark's star power are now questioning their investments. Television networks are scrambling to find compelling storylines to fill the void. Even opposing teams are feeling the impact, as games against the Fever were previously guaranteed ratings bonanzas that filled arenas and generated buzz. Corporate partnerships that had been built around Clark's marketability are being reassessed. Companies that had invested heavily in WNBA sponsorships based on the growth trajectory she represented are now facing internal questions about return on investment. Some are already exploring exit strategies from deals that no longer provide the exposure they anticipate. What's particularly troubling for the WNBA is how quickly the narrative shifted from celebrating record-breaking growth to damage control mode. Just months ago, executives were touting unprecedented expansion in viewership and attendance. Now they're facing the harsh reality that much of that growth was directly tied to one player's presence on the court. The speed of this decline has caught league officials off guard. Internal projections had accounted for some decrease in engagement during Clark's absence, but the magnitude of the drop has exceeded even the most pessimistic estimates. Board meetings that had been focused on expansion plans are now centered on damage control and crisis management. The situation has also highlighted the league's shallow talent pool when it comes to marketable stars. While there are certainly skilled players throughout the WNBA, none possess Clark's unique combination of on-court excellence and mainstream appeal. Her ability to connect with casual sports fans, particularly younger demographics, was something the league had never experienced before. Talent evaluators are now scrambling to identify players who might have similar crossover potential. The search isn't just for basketball talent, but for personalities that can transcend the sport and appeal to broader audiences. This process is revealing just how rare Clark's combination of skills and charisma really is. Industry insiders are already speculating about the long-term implications for Clark's career trajectory. Soft tissue injuries have a way of recurring, especially when players return too quickly from previous injuries. If Clark becomes injury-prone, it could fundamentally alter her career arc, and by extension, the WNBA's growth trajectory. Medical experts who have worked with similar cases emphasize that the next few months will be critical in determining whether these injuries become a chronic issue. The decisions made during her rehabilitation could impact not just this season, but her entire professional career. The pressure to make the right choices has never been higher. The silence from league officials about contingency plans is deafening. There's no backup strategy, no alternative storylines being promoted, no efforts to elevate other players to fill the marketing void. This reactive approach suggests the WNBA was caught completely off guard by their dependence on a single player. Strategic planning sessions that should have been happening during Clark's rise to prominence are now taking place in crisis mode. The league's marketing department is being forced to develop backup plans they should have had in place months ago. This reactive approach has left them scrambling to maintain relevance without their primary asset. The international implications are also significant. Clark's popularity had begun to extend beyond American borders, with international broadcast partners showing increased interest in WNBA games. Her absence has stalled those conversations and potentially set back the league's global expansion plans by years. European and Asian markets that had started paying attention to women's basketball because of Clark's star power are now reverting to their previous levels of disinterest. The momentum that had been building internationally has evaporated almost overnight, making future expansion efforts significantly more challenging. The panic is real and it's justified. Caitlin Clark's absence has exposed just how dependent the WNBA has become on her star power. Without her, the league struggles to maintain relevance in a crowded sports landscape. The next few weeks will determine whether this season can be salvaged or if it will go down as a cautionary tale about the dangers of putting all your hopes on a single player. But perhaps most concerning of all is what this situation reveals about the WNBA's foundation. A truly stable league shouldn't face existential questions when one player gets injured. The fact that Clark's absence has created such widespread panic suggests the WNBA's recent success was built on much shakier ground than anyone realized. And that's a problem that extends far beyond this season. The long-term consequences of this situation could reshape how professional sports leagues approach star development and marketing. The WNBA's experience serves as a cautionary tale about the risks of overdependence on individual players, no matter how talented or marketable they might be. As we watch this situation unfold, one thing becomes crystal clear. Caitlin Clark isn't just the WNBA's biggest star, she might be its only hope for sustained mainstream relevance. And right now, that hope is sitting on the sidelines, with no clear timeline for return. The league that thought it had finally broken through to the mainstream is learning the hard way that breakthrough success built on a single player is far more fragile than anyone imagined.